So I don't really need to say that Willy Wonka is just like one of the most recognizable characters in movies. Of course he is. That
Hmm.
film from the 70s with Gene Wilder, I think has been really ingrained in our consciousness for so long now. I know that at the
Yes.
time it wasn't necessarily a massive hit, but just due to cable and re-releases and for me
Shit.
personally watching
School.
that movie in school a lot, that became the way that
A
it just
lot.
grew into this phenomenon over decades and decades. And they've done sort of a reboot before. Tim Burton made a movie with Johnny Depp back in
Hmm.
2005, I believe it was. So now this is the third live action adaptation of the Willy Wonka character, which is of course also based off of a book from Ronald Dahl. And Timothy Chalamet, I think one of the biggest sort of up and coming actors in the world, stepping into this pretty big character, this pretty big pre-branded IP. This is something we've known about for a couple of years. We've slightly talked about it and what it might ultimately look like and what the film might be, but we finally got a chance to go check it out this past weekend to see what this vision was behind Wonka. And so, with all of that out the way, man, I'll pass it over to you. What did you think about this new film, Wonka?
This is a film that was so hard to really get excited for. Just the nature of everything surrounding it. I don't know what it was, man. I really like Timothy Chalamet, so I really can't say it was him, but maybe it's a combination of Timothy Chalamet and Wonka, and maybe what the trailer was. I don't know. I was never just all the way into this movie. I knew I would see it. Big fan of the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. But when I'm hearing news about this thing coming out, I'm like, okay, what is this going to be? What does this mean? Is Timothy Chalamet? Are we? Part of me thought we were going to do this whole thing over again by some ways, and then you find out it's a prequel. And you're like, okay, there could be something there, and I just don't know, man. So it was one of those weird things that I didn't know where to place it in terms of excitement. I will say, so I went into the theater with pretty low expectations. They were maybe even medium expectations because I love the original so much. So maybe medium expectations. I wanted to see what could be done, and they did exceed them a little bit. Not they didn't exceed them tremendously, but they did exceed them for me. I had a pretty good time with Wonka. Timothy Chalamet surprised me on a lot of different fronts, I think. But by the things that was able to do. One, of course, sing the way he was able to and dance the way he was able to. I had never seen him in anything like this, and I think he did a decent job doing a lot of those things. I actually really like one of the opening numbers. And I was like, Timothy Chalamet, where's all this coming from? We had seen him in all these other crazy dramas. Timothy Chalamet isn't known for musical work, nor has he ever been on like this a super poster child for Hollywood either. Again, he had been doing all these smaller kind of more artsy films, and so it was kind of cool, I think, seeing him be a star. And that's what it felt like when you were watching it, like, oh, this is Timothy Chalamet shot at being a star. And so I to be honest, for him in particular in this movie, I quite enjoyed him in the film, if anything. Wonka as a movie, it was fine. They were hitting a lot of beats that I feel like I had seen before. In our immediate reaction out of the theater, it felt like a Christmas movie to me. And I think that's okay. Like, it's fine. But one of the things about that is I think that the original just has is almost every song sticks with you in the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Like, every song, you're like, dang, everybody knows the Oompa Loompa song. Everybody knows, what I'm like. It's just so many songs that keep coming back. And in watching this, I couldn't really place that too many times. I've had new musicals that I like. I'll leave the theater and start singing songs that I know. And unfortunately, even in the theater, shoot, Jordan knows I'm singing an old Willy Wonka song, and nothing that was new. You know what I mean? And so I think the music, though all of the numbers were fine, though some of the things musically were fine, it wasn't enough to stick with me. And I think the music could have used some a little more heavy hitter energy when it came to the numbers in the film. So that's one of the takeaways. Other thing, supporting cast. There are four or five other characters that don't deal with the main two characters that are on the side of Timothy Chalamet, Wonka, and another character. What was her name? Noodles. Noodles. I think was her name. Noodles. I think is her name. There's a couple characters that kind of just fell by the wayside. You knew their purpose, you knew what they were there for. But beyond a couple of laughs and funny moments, they didn't really have too much to do, unfortunately. Who I did actually like was the antagonist. There are three antagonists in this film. I thought they did a decent job. Particular Patterson D. Joseph, I really liked him. I thought he was doing what he had to do on screen. He had to play this obnoxious chocolate CEO, and I think he was very pretentious, and I think I really liked his performance. So he was one of my favorite parts as well. But the story again, it just felt like something I had seen before. It felt very generic. They were hitting a lot of the beats that I feel like I've seen before, but it did have a lot of heart and it did have a lot of charisma. And it felt like something that once it's on TV in like a year, 2 years, it's gonna be like, oh, Wonka's on TV. It's Christmas time, is I think one of the takeaways I have from this film. Like, oh yeah, we've seen this movie before. And so Wonka's fine. It was cool. You laugh a little bit. You might get a heartstrings tugged at a little bit, but overall, it was just okay. And I think though it exceeded my expectations, I was still, I still wish they produced more. I think in this film. Other than that, I think it looked pretty good for the most part. It was that a lot of that stuff was fine. The only other thing I want to mention is the Oompa Loompa, which was like kind of not hitting for me. It was supposed to. It was like they wanted it to be funny, but he kind of wasn't just funny at all in any of the scenes he was in. And yeah, and that's unfortunate. Even in the trailer, I knew that from the trailer. I was like, that's not a funny joke. What's going on? Like, that's the trailer that's not funny. How you think I'm going to feel in the movie? And it did definitely carry over to the film. And so I appreciate them. I think adding some lore to the Wonka universe. Shout out to the writer. I always forget the writer, Ronald Dahl, right? Who is also wrote Matilda and all these other things. You could feel the book in the movie. I appreciate that as well. But again, I think as a film, some things just fell flat. While I think other things did exceed my expectations.
So I'll get right to it with Wonka. I did not like this movie. I thought that this was a complete misfire for the most part. The one thing that I was looking forward to, as I mentioned in our immediate reactions, was the fact that Paul King was the director. And Paul King has made the Paddington movies, which are some of the most joyful and great movies of the 2010s. They are just such a treat. And the second one is even better than the first one. So you just know that this guy knows how to make material that can strike an emotional
Hmm.
chord with you and make you feel that sense of wonder and awe and make you kind of feel childlike. And so that was the one thing that kind of got me excited. Like maybe this could have some potential to it. But after seeing the movie, none of that landed for me at all. This film is a full blown musical. There's like 10 or 12 musical numbers. They never marketed that, by the way, which is just so interesting to me because Hollywood has completely abandoned marketing musicals because they know that people just don't like musicals. Look at the Mean Girls trailer, and none of the numbers are memorable at all. I think a lot of those numbers fall flat. They aren't songs necessarily that you're going to be singing or remembering. As you just noted, you walk out singing the most notable song, which comes from the original, which is Pure Imagination,
Hmm.
which they save until the end. I'll give them credit for that because that has the most emotional resonance. But every other musical number, which comprises a large majority of this film, just completely fell flat for me. But my biggest gripe with the film is the fact, and this is probably just a personal problem, I can admit that, is the fact that the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie inherently has some darker themes and is a little bit more of a cynical approach to this entire world, especially in the performance of Gene Wilder, who says some
Hmm.
kind of crazy shit. He's a little condescending. He talks down to the
Yeah.
kids and to the parents. You can feel that sense of darkness and almost that mean spirited nature in that character, while also still presenting that sense of joy and wonder and the fact that he loves what he does, but he's also looking for kind of a way out and a successor. You feel all of that in his performance. And so when you see Timothy Chalamet in this role, which this is supposed to be an origin story for a character that we know so much and know so well, it's the
Mhm.
total opposite. You don't get any of that in this character. This is just a guy who knows magic. He's always in good spirits. He's very
Mhm.
jokey and quippy. He's very much ready to sing and establish relationships. He's way too trusting and way too naive. It just feels completely dissimilar to what Gene Wilder did in that original movie. And yes, I hear
Yeah.
you right now. Like, yes, they're trying to do their own thing. This isn't necessarily supposed to be a direct prequel. It's kind of its own standalone film that takes place in a different
Hmm.
continuity altogether. I totally get and buy that. But I think just the thing that we have to remember and understand is I think a part of the reason why that original film hit so well is that it does have some of those undertones of darkness to it. It isn't all just jokes and quips and comedy and music. Like there's actually
Hmm.
like some real stuff underneath the surface of like this character. Like, oh, I want to know more about Willy Wonka. He seems super mysterious. Why is he acting that way for this guy who's supposed to be the poster boy for chocolate, the greatest chocolate in the world? He has this amazing factory. He has all the chocolate at his disposal, but he doesn't seem happy. And that's a real
Hmm.
thing that they don't ever explore really in this movie at all. And I think that that's something that makes the character who he is. And by the time I walked out of this, I was just thinking like, well, they kind of made this movie completely for kids. And I think kids could enjoy this, but I don't even know if that's true because the kids that were sitting next to me and in front of me had no
Hmm.
reactions to this movie at all. Like at any point during the film, they had literally no reactions, no laughter, no anything. And I was right there with them because I'm like kind of bored by a lot of the material. And overall, it just felt like something that really lacked the imagination of what I would hope out of Willy Wonka material in particular. And so at this point, after watching the Tim Burton film, which is not great, and then watching this film, which is not
I do
great,
not like that movie.
them adapting this character over and over for different generations just hasn't worked thus far. And that's not to say that it can't work in the future, but so far I haven't been proven that there is a truly interesting take to get me to buy
Hmm.
into like why we want to know more about Willy Wonka as a person outside of what we already saw in the original. Exploring a backstory, an origin story, how he rose to prominence and came to be who he was, that's an interesting premise. You could do a lot with that.
Hmm.
But at no point do we see like why this guy becomes who he is, why he kind of starts to break bad a little bit. You know, maybe if
Hmm.
they get a sequel, which they probably will because the movie's doing pretty well right now, maybe if they get a sequel, they can decide to potentially go down those darker paths. I'm not saying that I'm going to be
Hmm.
here for it and support it, but that is something that I guess that they could create runway for in the future. But with this one, if this is supposed to be everything that you put behind a movie and you want us to get us to really buy into a story, it just didn't work for me. It's missing a lot of those darker elements, which I think are really, really integral to the character and to this mythology. The music, which is what they hugely focus on, doesn't do anything for me. And a lot of the supporting characters are kind of forgettable. There's some really good talented people here, and none of them really
Hmm.
stand out. To your point about Hugh Grant as the Oompa Loompa, I don't think that that hits because he hated filming this. He just talked about the fact that he did not have a good time making this movie. And so if you're not going to have a good time on set, if you don't want to be there, then that's going to come through in your performance. Because I can tell,
Hmm.
buddy, you do not want to be in this fucking makeup and this green screen that you're probably acting against right now. And so I just don't think that this is necessarily worth anything to make your make extra time out to go see. I think that this is something that they should probably once again put away for a while. And I don't know, perhaps one day somebody will have a really interesting take and they can try it again in the future. But at this point, I hope not. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the brand new film Wonka. If you check this out, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.